Today's tale involves two Breton brothers. Both believing to be the sole survivors of their family, they reunite many years later after a tragedy at their estate. Once reunited, the tale of reclaiming their home begins, as well as a dark secret emerges in which a shady figure begins asking questions. This is the entire story of both Reynald and Guilbert Jemane. The first quest with the Jemane brothers, separated at birth, begins with the player in Coral. This quest can either be activated by asking around town for rumors, or in my case, I just headed straight for the Grey Mare, as no one would discuss the topic with me. Once inside, I had to wait around for a few hours as Reynald Jemane was nowhere to be found. But when I was done waiting, he was sitting at the dining table, which was where I approached him.
They went off and...
If I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times, I've never been to Reynald. Oh, hang on, you're someone else. Apologies, my good friend, I mistook you for someone else. Always being asked about it, I am. Didn't I see you in Reynald, they say? Well, I'm sick of it. Sick and tired and sick, and perhaps a little drunk. But never mind. You look like the honest sort, so I've got a job for you. You're going to travel to Reynald and find out what sort of impostor is trying to besmirch my good name. And you're going to tell him... I'm quite capable of besmirching my good name on my own. You should cease and desist immediately. There's 50 gold pieces in it for you, friend. Right then, off you go.
Reynald Jemane mentions that everyone keeps asking him what he was doing in Reynald. He has apparently never been to the city though, so something is definitely going on. He asks us if we're able to go to Reynald and confront the man who might have stolen his identity. As he said in a line that I personally love, he's perfectly capable of besmirching his own good name. He then gives us 50 gold as a token of appreciation. Asking about Reynald went like this.
Undo. Reynald Jemane? No. Don't know anyone by that name. There's a Guilbert Jemane in town, however. Maybe he can help you. He's staying over at the Newlands Lodge, but you also might find him walking around town. Good luck.
Interestingly, there's someone by the name of Guilbert Jemane in the city of Reynald. This could very well be the same person whom everybody is confusing Reynald with. We go inside the Newland Lodge to seek him out.
Is there something I can do for you? He's alive? I was told that my mother and brother never survived. This is amazing. I'll need to go see him at once. You'll have to excuse me. I'd better leave right away. But please, come and see us in Coral. It would be wonderful for us both to be able to thank you for helping us find each other again.
Guilbert Jemane, who is practically a doppelganger of Reynald, shows his shock that Reynald, who is actually his brother, is still alive. We don't get much information yet, but he tells us that he didn't know that his mother and brother survived. He then tells us that he's going to Coral at once and that we should meet him and Reynald there. Since I fast traveled, I lost track of where Guilbert was. I also wasn't paying attention on where to meet them, so I went back to the Grey Mare Inn. I waited for a few hours and neither of the brothers showed up. I exited the inn and saw that the compass updated to somewhere else in Coral. I left for that spot at once, and when I got there, the Jemane brothers were outside and reuniting with one another.
What? Who? Oh, damn, not this again. Wake up! Wake up! You're not dreaming, Reynald. It's me, your brother, Guilbert. That can't be. I don't have a brother. I mean, I never knew my real family. Who did you say you were again? I am your twin brother. When we were very small, our farm was attacked by ogres. Our father and I escaped. We thought you and Mother had both been killed, if we had only known. All I know is that traveling merchants found me in the wilderness by the body of my mother. I was raised by the monks at Waynon Priory. My brother, it is wonderful to see you again. We will have much to talk about in the next days. I can't believe I've been reunited with my brother. I can't thank you enough for helping to reunite me with Reynald. I never would have guessed he was still alive. We have much to discuss, but if you have time, I'd beg you to stay a moment longer and hear about our home, Weatherly. He's Reynald. I'm Guilbert. Weatherly was our family's home for generations. Our parents fled it when ogres attacked. They became separated. My father carried me to safety. He later returned and believed Reynald and my mother had perished. Since ogres are cannibals, he didn't expect to find their bodies. Thankfully, however, it seems that my mother managed to carry Reynald to safety. While my mother didn't survive, Reynald did, and for that I'm grateful. But we both want more. We want our home back. We're not fighters. You appear to have more skill than either of us. Would you go to Weatherly and see if it's still inhabited by ogres? Thank you. Now, we're not quite sure where the estate is located. We'll offer up what we know, however. We believe it's somewhere south of Coral, but north of Fort Kamala. It may be difficult to find. Since no one's lived there for many years, it may be quite overgrown by now. If you find it, let us know. We'll be waiting anxiously.
After watching the two brothers reunite a few times, if anyone else caught it, I'm pretty sure Reynald said lines that Guilbert was supposed to say. Guilbert says at first that him and his father escaped, and then, for some reason, Reynald says he thought both Guilbert and his mother had died. And then Guilbert says that he was found by his mother's body, and he was raised at Wenyon Priory, even though Reynald grew up in Coral and was the one to escape with his mother. Anyway, I can't fault the game too much on this confusion. Guilbert thanks us for reuniting him and Reynald, and then asks us for another favor. Guilbert asks us to reclaim their home of Weatherly. Ogres were what sacked the estate and ultimately killed their mother. They're likely still at the property, and so he asks us to take care of the creatures. He isn't quite sure where the property is though, and gives us rough coordinates. Asking around town, everyone will direct us to a woman named Sabine Lal at the Fighters Guild. Speaking to her went like this.
We're looking for recruits. Interested? Let me see. Oh yes, I remember. I think it's directly south of Coral. Place was overrun with ogres though. Nasty brutes. Here, let me show you where it is on your map.
Sabine Lal was able to mark the estate on our map, which helped us greatly. By foot, the walk was a little long. I stopped by a way shrine of Debella for a blessing. I even paid a little visit to my favorite settlement of Hackdirt. Finally, after some time walking south of the city, at the foot of a small hill, I saw a settlement with 3 ogres outside of it. I got my gear ready and went to go battle them. They weren't too difficult with my gear, but they certainly packed a punch when they hit me. I was quickly able to dispatch of all 3 ogres. Interestingly, these Redguard Valley ogres are significantly shorter than regular ogres. After killing the 3, I set foot inside of the manor to see if there were any more enemies. Looking around, the place was completely turned upside down. Most interestingly, there were a bunch of human bones scattered around the place. There was even a charred corpse inside one of the fireplaces. The craziest scene by far was the attic. There must have been close to a dozen different human remains up there. For some reason, I couldn't get the quest to update. It made me go around the back of the house, and it finally did a double journal entry update. With Weatherly officially clear of the ogres, it was time to go tell the Jemane brothers the good news. I fast traveled from the estate back to Coral and found the brothers at the Grey Mare Inn.
You haven't seen...
Is it safe for us to return to Weatherly yet? Wonderful. Weatherly is ours. Are you ready to take us there now? Right.
The Jemane brothers were ecstatic about us clearing out Weatherly. Now all that's left is to take them there. The nice part is once they're following you, you can simply just fast travel to the estate and they will spawn in with you. Once at the manor, the journal will update and we should speak once more with Guilbert.
Thanks so much for getting us here safely. I'm afraid we aren't very wealthy, but here is all I can offer you at this time. Please, visit us again soon. You are welcome here any time, my friend. At long Guilbert should be able to help you with...
And that ends the tale of Reynald and Guilbert Jemane. Or so we thought. Approximately 2 days after reclaiming Weatherly for the Jemane brothers, we will be approached by someone if we set foot in the city of Coral. I had to force a 48-hour wait period, and then I waited a little longer, but soon a mysterious dark elf approached me.
I may have a bit of a proposition for you involving the Jemane family you so recently assisted. It was kind of you to escort the Jemanes back to Weatherly. However, the original owner of Weatherly left them an even greater legacy. In fact, there's quite a bit more to their family history than meets the eye. Want to hear about it? Excellent. Curiosity should never be denied, is it not so? And who knows, my story may prove profitable to both of us once it has come to its end. My tale actually begins with the father, Albert Jemane. He was once in my employ, or should I say, the employ of my organization. He was very good at obtaining things that people did not want to part with. A professional thief, to put it bluntly. He was assigned to obtain a very valuable item for me. He succeeded, but decided to keep this item for himself. An unfortunate decision. He fled from Coral with his family, and was never heard from again. Only his small son, Reynald, was found, wandering alone in the wilderness. Naturally, my associates and I believed he had perished. The wilderness is, after all, a dangerous place. No place to take your family. Then, these many years later, voila! The brother reappears. It seems the rest of the family did not die in the wilderness after all. Indeed. What is the point of my tale? Albert Jemane builds Weatherly way out in the middle of nowhere. He was a thief, not a farmer. The only reason to establish such a place would be to stay out of the Coral Guard's sight. I believe that the item Albert stole, which rightly belongs to me, was hidden at the Weatherly settlement. Unfortunately, the notorious Red Guard Valley ogres ransacked the place and probably took all of the loot back with them. If you were to obtain this item somehow and bring it to me, I would pay you very well for it. I can get you started by telling you where the ogres live. The rest is up to you. Guilbert and Reynald know nothing of their father's past deeds. If you want to tell them about it, suit yourself. I do not care to describe it. You will know it when you see it, I think. It is not something one of the ogres should have in his possession. There isn't much to tell you about Albert Jemane. He was one of my best, then he got greedy. The rest is history.
This dark elf named Fothus Eulis approached us in the street and dropped a bit of a bombshell on us. He reveals that the brother's father, Albert Jemane, was actually a professional thief within Fothus's employment. Albert apparently stole an extremely valuable item for Fothus, but instead decided to keep it for his own. Fothus then says that Albert abandoned the city life and moved to the country in order to escape the guards. Soon thereafter, the ogres came and destroyed Weatherly. In doing so, they also stole many valuables, including the coveted item. Fothus then marks the location of Red Guard Valley Cave on our map, and we decide to head there and check it out. Arriving at Red Guard Valley Cave, there were 2 goblins stationed outside. They were pretty easy to kill, and both were dispatched quickly. I entered inside of the cave and was immediately met with a few ogres. Red Guard Valley Cave only has one zone, so it isn't too tricky to find your way around. The one zone is relatively large, however, and if you maneuver correctly, you can make it to the Ogre Chieftain with only having to kill 1 or 2 other ogres in the process. I didn't know this at the time, and my compass wasn't updating either. It kept telling me to leave the cave for some reason, so I was sort of on my own. I managed to go through every single ogre in the cave. There are 7 in total, and similar to the ones we faced at the manor, they die easily, but hit hard. I found the best strategy was to use a weapon with long reach and then sort of bait them into attacking you. Once you see their combat motion, strafe away for a second, then come back in for the long reach attack. It can be confusing on where to go because there are a few different pathways and passages that connect all around the cave. The way to the Ogre Chieftain is through the lower level passageway tunnels and all the way to the bottom portion of the local map. The Chieftain is actually quite tough. He hits even harder and has more health than the Stonewreckers. He even humbled me as I wasn't paying attention to my health. Like I mentioned before, we only need to kill the Chieftain, so I tried my best to sneak past the rest of the ogres. I only needed to kill 2 or 3 this time, and even managed to fire a few arrows at the Chieftain, getting a nice sneak attack bonus. This time around, it wasn't too tricky of a fight, and maybe that's because my axe's enchantment didn't run out of charge. Looking into the Chieftain's inventory, we see a really nice and powerful sword called the Honor Blade of Coral. By picking it up, we get a detailed journal entry indicating that this is indeed the item that Albert Jemane stole. The journal entry also says that it could be a good idea to see if anybody at the castle knows anything about this blade. We look around for a little bit of loot and then we promptly leave the cave. Once outside, we fast travel to the city of Coral. We're now faced with a bit of a tricky decision. Do we deliver this blade to Fothis Eulis like he originally requested, or do we take this blade to Castle Coral and see if anybody knows anything about it? I personally decided to head to Castle Coral. It was partly due to this blade that the Jemane brothers lost their family and their home. I also thought it was best to return the blade back to its rightful ownership, and I didn't really like the cut of Fothis Eulis' jib. The compass directs us to Leith Wavrick, and he has this to say.
Hello, I'm Leith Wavrick, the Chief Herald and Countess Velga's attendant. Welcome to Coral. Many years ago, when the Count was still alive, a daring thief stole the ancient honor blade of Coral from out of this castle. Why? This is incredible. I never thought to see this sword again. How did you... Never mind. One should not look a gift horse in the mouth. Please accept my thanks on behalf of the people of Coral for restoring this sword and the honor of our city. As a token of our gratitude, I bestow upon you a symbol of honor and heroism, the escutcheon of Coral. You've done a great service to Coral, and you should be proud.
Leith Wavrick mentions that the Honor Blade of Coral was once stolen from within the castle. It has major significance to the city of Coral, and it checks out that many years ago, Albert Jemane would have taken it. We have the option to back out of giving him the blade, but I chose to personally hand it over. He extends his gratitude and says that we've done Coral a major service. He also rewards us with something called the Escutcheon of Coral. The Escutcheon of Coral is a heavy armor shield, and it's actually quite unique and valuable. It has the Great Sigil of Coral embossed on the front, and it fortifies endurance by 7 points and reflects damage for up to 20%. Now, all that's left to do is to return to Weatherly and inform the Jemane brothers about their father. I stepped out of the castle and fast traveled back to the estate. Upon arrival, I sought out Guilbert Jemane, and he had this to say.
You have something to tell me about my father? I'm at a loss for words. Already I've heard that the Honor Blade rests again in Castle Coral, and the escutcheon of Coral you have is all the proof I need. My father had told us that he had hidden something away for us, something to provide for our future, but I never imagined it was this. I'm sorry you had to be tasked to right this wrong that my father was responsible for. Once again, you've stuck your neck out for us. Maybe in the past my family was notorious, but never let it be said that the current Jemanes don't pay their dues. I'd like you to have this keepsake. My father gave it to me when I was but a lad. I think you should have it. Thanks again, my friend. You are always welcome in our home.
So we told Guilbert Jemane about his father. He was surprised, but he wasn't distraught, which was good to see. He mentioned that his father might have hidden the sword away for the brothers' future. Guilbert rewarded us with 4 grand soul gems, and that was the end of that. Speaking to Reynald, he really didn't have much to talk about with us. I decided to head inside of the manor to see how it looked after all was said and done. To my surprise, everything was still broken, tossed around, and out of place. This was actually a bug apparently, and was a little disappointing to see. And thus, the tale of Reynald and Guilbert Jemane ends. Let's see if we can dive into anything that's a little past the surface level for these quests. Separated at Birth is a short and simple introduction to the Jemane brothers. We first hear about Reynald Jemane through some rumors, or in my case, you might just shoot straight for the Grey Mare and seek him out. A lot of the Coral citizens have claimed to see him in Shadenhall, and are quite upset that he acted like he didn't even know them. They also claim that the version of him in Shadenhall was sober, which isn't normal for Reynald. Speaking to Reynald, he is indeed drunk, but confirms that everyone seems to have spotted him in Shadenhall, a city in which he's never even been to. We're tasked with going to the city and finding this person whom is seemingly impersonating Reynald. Going to Shadenhall and speaking with a guard, they don't know a Reynald Jemane, but they do know a Guilbert Jemane. We seek him out at the local inn and begin speaking to a literal carbon copy of Reynald. Guilbert is in shock to hear that his brother is alive. He then says that he thought his mother and brother had died. We agree to meet him back in Coral, in which we do, and the brothers reunite. Guilbert is clearly the more put together brother, while Reynald is a little more dismantled and broken down. We hear a little more history in that their home was attacked, and Reynald fled with their mother, who perished soon thereafter, and Guilbert fled with their father. This is when the first of 3 quests ends. Honestly, everything about this quest was relatively straightforward. Looking into it further, it's actually a well-known bug in which the brothers' dialogue does get mixed up. Somewhat interesting is that there are good chances that most players may not even get to experience that dialogue. If we were to follow Guilbert to Reynald, we would likely have encountered another bug that completely skips over this dialogue. According to more community sites, accompanying Guilbert from Shadenhall, while a long and dangerous journey, can be very profitable and generous at higher levels. Since he is flagged as essential, he will just get knocked unconscious and then keep on fighting. This is a great way to tag team your way into plundering some good loot. The second quest involving the Jemane brothers, Legacy Lost, begins immediately after completing Separated at Birth. We can talk to Guilbert and he will ask of us a favor. He spills more information on the family. They lived at a countryside estate called Weatherly. One day, many years ago, ogres swarmed the house and began attacking. Guilbert and their father fled, believing that Reynald and their mother had perished. As we now know, that was not the case for Reynald. While their mother did die, Reynald was found soon thereafter. Gilbert asks us to find Weatherly, clear it of any threats, and reclaim it for the brothers. He isn't quite sure where it is, however, and gives us a rough area to look in. Speaking around town, we get directed to Sabine Lal of the Fighters Guild. She's able to point out directly where it is on the map, which marks it for us. We head there and see a sacked farmhouse. Outside are 3 short ogres called Red Guard Valley Ogres. After killing them, the quest updates and we fast travel back to Guilbert. He and Reynald are ecstatic about the news, and we get asked to escort them there. We do so via fast travel, and then we get rewarded, thus ending the second quest. We get a little more background here from Guilbert on the family, which we've gone over a few times now. Interesting to note is that he mentions their father did indeed go back to Weatherly to look for Reynald and their mother. The house must have been void of any ogres though, if he was able to look around the property unharmed. As we find out in the next quest, the ogres are more than likely coming and going as they please. That begs the question of why return to Weatherly then? Well, I think the answer to that can be seen scattered on the floor and burning to a crisp in the fireplace. There are a lot of human remains within the farmhouse. It certainly is possible that the ogres are killing people and then just bringing them back to eat, but I believe bandits, outlaws, and even adventurers might be the ones stepping foot inside the estate, only to never come back out. Perhaps this could be in search of a resting area after a long day's travel. Or maybe it's for more nefarious reasons, like to steal valuables, or worse, to check and see if anyone is indeed home. I also find it interesting that their father never requested aid from the city of Coral to reclaim their home. Or maybe he did, but we just didn't hear that part of the story. It's also interesting that both fleeing parties didn't try and make their way to Hackdirt, which is certainly the closest settlement. But again, it's probably for the better that both the mother and the father did not, or they could have been sacrificed to the Deep Ones. For all we know, honestly, the ogres could have very well been the Deep Ones that Hackdirt's been referring to. They live underground in a vast network of caves nearby to the settlement of Hackdirt and its network of caves. They're excellent at digging and even have titles such as Stonewrecker. The Deep Ones require sacrifices, and the ogres did go out of their way to attack the Jemanes, successfully killing their mother. The timeline might even add up for when their mother was killed and when the last known sacrifice had occurred. Within Hackdirt's tunnels, we hear deep guttural growls. The ogres also make deep growling noises. It's more food for thought than it is possible, but it certainly is interesting to think about. The third and final quest involving the Jemane brothers is called Sins of the Father. This quest triggers after 2 days have passed since the reclamation of Weatherly. When the player steps foot inside of Coral, they will be sought out by a dark elf named Fothis Eulis. Fothis tells us that he knew the brothers' father, Albert Jemane. Albert was actually a professional thief in the employment of Fothis. One day, Fothis sent him out to steal a very valuable item. He successfully nabbed it, but decided to keep it for himself. He then moved away from the city, and the whole family took up residence at Weatherly. Fothis then goes on to say that when the ogres sacked Weatherly, they took that coveted item with them. Now that item resides in Redguard Valley Cave, with the Redguard Valley ogres. He offers us a reward if we can retrieve it and bring it back to him. He also mentions that the brothers don't know of their father's true occupation. We set out for the cave, which is pretty close to Weatherly. Once inside, we make our way through 7 Redguard Valley ogres before fighting the ogre chieftain. Once it's dead, we loot it only to find out what was taken was a ceremonial sword called the Honor Blade of Coral. We contemplate who to give the sword to, either Fothis Eulis or the city of Coral. Exiting the cave and arriving back in town, we decide to bring it to the castle. Speaking with Leith Wavrick, he says that many years ago, the blade was stolen from the castle and has been missing ever since. We decide to hand it over and are rewarded with a pretty neat shield. Finally, we head back to the Jemane brothers and speak with Guilbert one last time. He's surprised to hear about his father, but he isn't distraught or upset about the news. He thanks us and rewards us. Thus ends the final quest involving the Jemane brothers. There's a little more to unpack with Sins of the Father. For starters, I can't shake the feeling that Fothis might have been involved in the original tragedy at Weatherly. I don't really have much evidence for this claim. Just the way Fothis speaks about Albert and the way he tells the story of Albert fleeing Coral and the brothers surviving, there's a particularly sinister flair to it all. It's also quite strange that he knows the Honor Blade of Coral has been taken to Redguard Valley Cave, which coincidentally he also knows is the home of the ogres. It certainly isn't the hardest information to piece together, but he must have confirmed that soon after the tragedy, as who's to say an adventurer or a bandit didn't take the sword from the home. Maybe he jumped at the first chance to look through Weatherly when it got sacked, but the whole situation smells a little too sour for me. Piecing it together, Fothis Eulis is affiliated with the Thieves Guild, and even offers his services to us once we're made into the guild. This would mean that Albert Jemane was a member of the Thieves Guild, which I think is pretty neat. Unfortunately, for my suspicions, it isn't normally within the Thieves Guild's MO to kill people, even if it is by somehow leading ogres to their house. In the events I played through, I decided to give the Honor Blade of Coral to Leith Wavrick, and therefore the Countess. Interestingly, the blade can be pickpocketed off of Leith right after we hand it over. The blade is now ours and is no longer a quest item. While it does appear similar to an ebony longsword, it's actually pretty powerful. My character was only around level 10 and it dealt 24 base damage. If we don't pickpocket it in time, we can still steal it from the Countess, but only while she's asleep, as otherwise it will be equipped. If we had decided to hand it over to Fothis Eulis, we would receive a leveled amount of gold. Personally, I'll take the escutcheon over the septums. Handing it to Fothis and then speaking with Guilbert, he actually gets mad at us for the accusations against his father, as in this timeline, there isn't any proof of the Honor Blade's return to Coral. We gain infamy and the brothers' disposition towards us decreases by 30. During the events that we got, Guilbert mentions that his father always said there's something hidden away for their future. This was obviously the Honor Blade. It's a pretty neat gesture to think their father stole the blade, and instead of giving it into the guild, he decided to keep it for the future of his sons. He turned his back on crime and fled the city, so that way, when the day came, he could sell the blade and set Guilbert and Reynald's lives up. I'd like to think that when he went back to check for his wife and Reynald after the initial attack, he also checked for the blade. Noticing it was gone, he might have thought to himself that it was all for nothing, and that his family had perished for no good reason. It would have been a really cool option to get to hand the blade over to the brothers. That way, in their hands, they get to decide what to do with it. Whether they'd want to fence it to the guild, or hand it back to Coral would have been up to them. Finally, I unfortunately encountered a bug while playing through this quest. Apparently, there's a glitch where if the player rushes into Redgar Valley Cave too quickly, like I did, and not before the quest can update, the quest stage will never reach exactly level 20, which would have triggered Weatherly to be fully rebuilt and put back together. This is why it was still in ruins, full of human remains, and burning down when all of the quests were said and done, and it can never be fixed. Overall, I quite like the Jemane brothers quests. There's 3 in total, which makes their encounters quite meaty. The first one is a little lackluster, quite obviously, but it feeds us small amounts of lore and wanting to hear more about their backstory. The second quest, we get to physically experience that lore by heading to their broken down farmhouse and defeating ogres, receiving more insight as it goes on. And the third quest is a nice surprise that triggers a few days after completing the second one. This quest offers even more lore and history to the family, and it even shouts out the Thieves Guild and offers the player a choice, which I'm always a sucker for in these games. So that was the entire story for the Jemane brothers, and until next time, keep on adventuring.